Hello, my name is Lily Wu. Today I have someone sitting beside me. She is a professor and researcher from Autonomous University of Barcelona. And I'm going to interview her about today's topic about digital media in education setting. Okay, before we dive into our topic, I'm going to let her introduce a little bit about herself and her background.
Yeah, thank you, Lily. So I am a professor, as you were saying. I work in the Faculty of Education in the Department of Applied Pedagogy. And as a professor, I teach the course Digital Education to the several degrees of education we offer back in the UAB, or AUB if we were using like English acronym, which is located in Spain. And as a researcher, I also focus on the general topic of digital technologies for education, like teaching and learning in general, and also apply to the school organization so that can change within the trends. Right now, it's very focused on AI, so generative AI for teaching and learning.
Right.
That's our main focus, but it's digital technologies in general for education.
I see. So, I guess to start off, I think my question for you would be, what is the transformation you're seeing in the past few years from old medias to newer current digital medias, especially in education setting?
Right. So that's actually a really good point and something that we make sure our future teacher students, like the teacher candidates, as you call them here, right?
Yeah, TC, I call it TC.
Exactly. So that's something we really want them to learn about because their experience growing up might not be the same experience as the current children growing up, which they will be working with at school, right?
Right.
So we dedicate a lot of time to teach about media literacy. Have you heard about this term before?
Oh yeah, because I'm doing my program, we always talk about how do you help the student build up their digital literacy, digital competencies, right? Yes, I definitely heard of that.
Definitely. Yeah. And media is a big part of how we receive information, right?
Right.
Because it's right there. That's actually why before digital technologies were called ICT, like information and communication technologies, because it was mostly about information and communication. Right. So media, now it's not just that anymore, but it's still a big part of it. So we for sure need to understand that ourselves and then let our students understand. So before, who had access to media to produce versus to consume, right? So we sort of, everyone kind of had access to consume, but not everyone had access to produce this media.
Because it reminds me of the article that I did just last week in my group presentation. We summarized about the article we read, all about that media.
Right.
The information was given to students. Who is the person had that power or knowledge to what kind of content the teacher want to give the students, right? That's so important. That impact how student view themselves, their identity.
Definitely.
Yeah, especially the article was talking about three girls from Muslim background, minority groups, female, like girls, their religions, gender, all have influences on them and in their learning as well in school setting. They feel like they're being racist and having that discrimination happening in school. It does have a strong impact on them. The self-confidence problem, right? Yeah, and then they were talking about on the field trip, they went to York University. After that 1.5 hours, they produced like 10 videos in total, compared to only 6 videos they produced at school setting in Toronto. Because I was curious about what's the factors that influences the amount of the videos they can create it, right? At a school year, at that school setting, only in total 6 videos were produced. There must be something wrong, right? It's not just simply you provide the student with the tool, the digital tools to use, then the problem solved. It's not that simple.
Exactly.
I think it has some other factors.
Right.
Yeah, so Professor Laya, what do you think about this?
So that might be extremely complex because of their backgrounds, but also because education in general, as commonly happens in social sciences is extremely complex and intersectional.
Right.
So many variables and many factors coming into place at one same time, right?
Yeah.
So that might be something we might need to look at, the experience that these children had growing up in the school setting,
Right.
especially if they were tagged under a specific category, like as conflictive or not. Maybe the teachers have
because
a background.
they wear hijab.
For example, that might be one reason
Yes,
why,
yes.
right? Especially if we're receiving these messages from certain groups of people, like backgrounds and what they do, you know, and like if we're receiving that information from the media, that can also help, like, affect our own perception as teachers. So we do need to break with that. But we should also take a look at the experiences that they have had growing up. Maybe they don't like school assignments because they haven't been treated the best in school, right? So maybe when they do something out of the school, it doesn't look like schoolwork, so it's just kind of doing it for fun. Exactly.
Right.
So that might be more motivating. Or perhaps they had better tools there. Or perhaps something happened within, I don't know, their lives and they were more motivated.
You are right. Even at the school setting, they mentioned about the bullying, the issues. These girls have a big challenges going to school because they have a lot of like experience, like bad and negative experiences. And now let's get back to our initial question about that transformation from the old media to current newer media. What's something have been changed now, you see?
Yeah, so there's many big changes, but mainly it relates to what we were saying before, between who is the person or who are the people who are able to not only consume these types of media, but to also be producers, right? Because when you produce something, you are expressing your voice in a way, right? So before, when we think about like those traditional, like more traditional types of media, what do we think about? We think about the newspaper, TV, radio. That's what kind of comes to mind, right? So who was behind these forms of media? Well, typically like big corporations, right? Like big companies, mostly private, with perhaps some economic interests behind, right? And some figures. So the question is, who were these people and who were they trying to, like whose stories were they trying to tell, right? But now when we think about more current types of media, we think about social media, right? So now I like to say it's like current forms of media are more democratic, and we use that word at least back home because it's like more people have access to that, right? So if before you wanted to have a newspaper, you would have to have someone fund you, right? But now it's super easy to just go on any social media app and start an account. And you can make videos, you can post texts, depending on what type of content you want to create. You can choose one sort or another sort, but it's so accessible, right? But with this, also with the rise of internet and like the difference between web 1.0 versus 2.0, comes some challenges as well, because with that comes also clickbait purposes, how we play with images too, because before media production, like the content was more reduced, so it was not as necessary to compete, right? But now we have so much content out there, so people need other like consumers to focus on their content, so now we need to catch people with clickbait, for example, which before was not a thing. So how we use images, how we use words, like how we select images and words, right? Also, fake news are a big challenge that now that before it was not so common. Deep fakes, AI, right? So it is more democratic, I would say. That's a big difference. But also it's more challenging because before, since it was only a few, like a small selection of society basically creating this media, it was sort of, you could trust what they were saying because they were professionals telling it. That was the thought, right? If you see it on the news, it must be true. But now, if you see something online, it's not necessarily true.
Right.
So it is more democratic, but it does come with some challenges that we need to be aware of first, and of course, make our students aware of.
Exactly. It reminds me of, I think last week, the news came out. It has a clear picture, shows CN Tower in Toronto was on fire.
Really?
But it's the fake news.
Whoa.
Yeah, so AI make that image, the fake image, right? So it caused a lot of people like worry about, is it true or is it just a fake news?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear something? I don't know if it's funny, but it's like an experience we had in about April, earlier this year. We had a major blackout in Spain. I don't know if you heard about it, but we ran out of power. The whole country was out of power for one day, which, sorry, it sounds crazy. Like, imagine just no electricity. It was crazy. And you know, misinformation was a big thing because no one had access to TV, like any sort of media. TV, not TV, not social media, only radio. If you had one of those old radios, right?
Yeah.
So, or your car, that could also be the case. So misinformation was a very big thing, and people started to invent these stories about it was a Russian attack, because in Europe it's the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is big.
Yes.
So they were saying it was a Russian attack against the whole European Union. They said they were seeing submarines attack, and they said all of Europe was out of power. Turns out it was not true, right?
Okay.
But some people who had access to social media, they were posting these stories, and then professionals from the radio stations, they had like generators, so they could generate power. They could see that those posts, and they were telling about them, so it became a big thing. Turns out it was fake.
Wow.
Yeah, so we are like the most informed generation. That's like the generation with more access to information.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the challenge is that we are the most misinformed generation. It's so hard.
So as a student, how can we help them to develop that critical thinking when it comes to digital literacies?
Right, that's a great question, and it's super challenging. So I would say the first thing we do is train teachers to be aware of this and sort of incorporate this in their daily practice. So if whenever they see something on the news, on social media, the first thing they do is have this critical thinking light bulb in their heads and just try to discriminate in a way. I'm not saying just do not trust everything you see, like don't be excessively mistrusting, I would say, but just try to question it, right? And teach the teachers some strategies to try and source whether that is a truthful source or not so much, right? And once they master that, they can also teach that to the students, and they could actually do different practices within school. So some strategies we teach about is like, for example, one thing, look at the headline. Is it a bit too dramatic? What types of words are they using? Are they trying to be sensationalist? Is that a word you're familiar with? Like sensationalism? Like, are they trying to make some emotions, like hatred, maybe against some social groups? That's something to look out for. Then what types of images are they using? Are they extremely dramatic? Because they play with that, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So that's something they play with. Then also, if they reference some studies, you know, sometimes they say 50% of whatever. So try to see what is the source of the study. Is it a big sample? Like, is it a significant study, or is it just you interviewed a couple of people? It's totally different, right? So who's the person behind this study? Also, that's important. Like, because again, if you might have an economic interest. Problem with the lighting, and we had to stop, but we're back at it. So as we were saying, just try to make sure that you are aware of the different sources of the information you're receiving, right? Also, if it's a primary source, so you're retrieving the information from the primary source, or is it a secondary source which might be changing the initial information, right? So those are some things to look out for. And then, sorry, those are some strategies that you could also use with your students, right? Let's just say kids are very curious, right? So when someone comes to class and says, I heard that whatever, whatever, or my mom says whatever, whatever. So we could perhaps just sit down with the students and have them do a background check on this information and see what different sources of information are saying, and maybe we can have a debate, a discussion, right? That's something you can do with students, and then you can also teach them to look out for this, like these things, right? Teach them also what are some reliable sources you can use, whereas some that might not be as reliable, right? So kind of you learn it yourself, and you just turn it into something natural in your day-to-day practice. Because again, teaching in a school is not just about teaching the content of how the earth moves in the solar system. It's not just that, right? There's a lot more into it.
So my next question for you would be, in the institutional contents, what can we do to actually help those underrepresented students, let's say the minority group of kids who's from different backgrounds, right? The religious background or economic, social economic status are lower, that kind of underrepresented groups of students. How can we help them learn better and benefit from using these digital tools during their learning journey at school?
Like, you mean how to encourage them to also be active
and
and
be more
participate?
engaging into the activities?
Right. So I think that even though I've been saying that the newest forms of media are more democratic, so everyone has access to it, we're still carrying a big, as we call them, like backpack of history, where there are still, even though everyone has the power to speak up and share their experience through social media, we're still carrying this big influence of certain groups, right, in the media. So, like, for example, if you take a look at influencers, I don't know here in Canada, but in Spain, the influencers that children follow and they look up to, they all pretty much look the same. Physically and ideologically, they belong to the same ethnic groups. So it's still there. It is a big difference, right? So I think, going back to your question, it's really important for what you do to look at what reference you have. Like those people you can look up to, right? So I think it is important to offer different types of references for children that they can relate to. So that could go back to, for example, when you are designing an educational material, like a worksheet, for example, as simple as a worksheet or a poster, or you're choosing to share a video, for example, that you are a bit extra aware of the type of people that appear in this video, because sometimes, since we are using already produced forms of audio visual content, we tend to reproduce the ones that we already have, right? So we sort of reproduce these prominence, like this
the dominant group,
of the dominant groups, So if you're a teacher, for example, you can take a look at the types of pictures you're choosing and make sure that your students are also represented there, right? That reminds me of a colleague of mine. She was sharing an experience back home. She's an English teacher in primary school, and she was working, not now anymore, but years ago, she was working with in a school context where a lot of them were Muslim. So kind of also relates to the article you were saying before, So when she was teaching English, and she was teaching about the vocabulary of family members, so she just was designing an activity and chose a photo of a family, and she just made sure it was a family, it was a Muslim family, right? So children were extremely excited when they saw the pictures, because they were saying, oh, they look like me, or they are wearing the hijab like my mom does, right? So they were extra engaged and really connected with the activity, right? And that can also relate not only to media and like audiovisual content, but also people you invite. Make sure they're from the community. Make sure they are successful people also, because you're also telling them without actually telling them, but you are telling them through the images, right?
Right.
You're telling them that this is also possible. Like, for example, they can also go to university, or they can have the job that they've always dreamed of, right? Because it's super important to have those references.
Yes.
So even though going back to like circling back to social media, even though it might be popular for them to follow the mainstream influencers who might not look like them, something we could also do is dig a little bit and see what options are there and put them out for them as well. Because there's a lot of Muslim influencers, for example, in Spain, we just maybe don't know about them because they're not as popular. Because again, also algorithms operate within a certain way and reproduce the voices of dominant groups, right? That happens. So we kind of need to, it's like swimming against the current. So if the current is favoring a certain group or different groups, maybe we have to swim against it and dig a little bit and find the alternatives, right? And put it for them. That's something we can facilitate as teachers.
Right, to make it more like inclusive learning environment for them, right?
Yes, for sure.
And make sure their voice are being heard.
Exactly.
Rather than being ignored, right?
Exactly. And perhaps if they hear someone's voice that is somewhat similar to theirs, they might feel empowered to also share their voice.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Right?
Come back to teacher as educator. You have to be like aware of, like be mindful about your, like remind us to be more aware of what kind of content you teach a student and how you do it, how you show the student. Because we have to make that connection with the student. Otherwise, if the student don't feel that connection with you, everything's meaningless. Right, so first we have to really get to know that students, their background, where they come from, and show more compassion, empathy towards them. Thank you for all sharing this insightful information with me.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so now could you give us one advice to the future teacher candidates like me?
For sure. So given my experience, if I were to give one piece of advice today, maybe it might change tomorrow. Because especially when we're talking about digital tools, everything changes so fast, right? You see, if we look back 3 years ago, no one would have heard about AI, but now it changes so fast, right? So if there's anything I would say, can I give 2 pieces of advice?
Sure.
Okay. One thing I would say is to always trust your pedagogical judgment. So anything you do, just truly think about what's going on in that context, like analyze what is going on in the context and then what suits the most, right? So if you're going to choose, let's say, to work with a certain digital tool or to work with certain type of media, just think about exactly what is that you want to do, what is that your children need exactly, or your school needs at that point, and then just choose, like, trust your pedagogical instinct and your pedagogical judgment and do that. So don't just follow any trends, is what I'm trying to say. Yes. So basically, like, try to make the best choice according to what you have at a certain point. Because what I might say today might be different tomorrow, right? And what applies to one context might not apply to the next one, right? So that's one thing I would say. And then the other thing I would say is that sometimes we put a lot of pressure on the teacher as one person.
Right.
But just remember, and that can be really draining for
And
teachers.
burn out, right?
Definitely, right? So just remember that a teacher never works alone. You actually work in a school. And the school is a big thing. It's an actual organization with different parts and different elements, which all interact together. And the teacher is never alone, right? So just when you do something, try not to do it yourself only as a teacher. Try to think about the institutional line and, like, have the support of the leadership team, for example, of the school documents. So if you want to do something, make sure it stays part of the organization, because when you have your students
Yep.
1 year, then next year they have a different teacher, you can
Right.
continue working under the same objectives and with the same along the same lines.
Right.
So that's something I would suggest, because otherwise we put a lot of effort and a lot of energy into something, as I was saying before, for example, with this really being mindful of the type of content you show to kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Make sure they're represented. So you might be doing a big effort doing this, but next year another teacher comes,
Right.
they don't do that anymore,
Exactly.
right? So we might be losing these efforts. So
Yeah.
I would suggest to always try to stick within the lines of the organization, and remember that you are working with other teachers, so
Yeah.
less pressure by your end.
Yeah. Collaborate, working with your colleagues and helping that student bridge that gap, right?
Yes.
From this classroom to that classroom, they're
Yes.
all on the same page. Like help them all like link it to what they learned. They can carry over moving forward to next year with a different teacher.
Right,
Still
definitely.
continually.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.